What is going on, guys? Welcome to the Masculine Health Solutions podcast, where I'm joined by Dr. Anthony Balduzzi. He's going to tell us a little bit more about health and focus. I think one of the focal points today is going to be men over 40. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right.
All right, excellent. Because there's a lot of you guys that listen to the show, and I know a lot of you guys are over 40. And for the guys that are younger, all these concepts are still going to apply to making your life better. So first and foremost, Dr. Balduzzi, how are you today, sir?
I'm doing well, really enjoying my life. I have meaningful work, got a good family, care so much about what I'm about to share today. So life is good.
Oh, dude, and I'm psyched to have you here. And like I said, you are doing God's work because I think this obesity epidemic has really I don't know, man, it's gone off the rails. And I know North America as a whole, whether it's the United States or Canada, it seems like it's a struggle that we're finding everywhere and it's really affecting men. So the first thing I kind of want to ask you in regards to that was like, what kind of turned you on to, hey, you know what? Let's start a Fit Father project to get dads in shape. What was it that really spurred that for you?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I kind of got into this a little bit through some personal tragedy. Is growing up, I had a childhood like most kids, like loved getting outside, playing with my little brother, riding my bike. I was born in New York and I actually grew up in Toronto, Canada. We
Oh,
kind of
nice.
split time between there and Canada. So I've been on both sides of the North American border there. What
Mhm.
was interesting though is in the process of just kind of like my childhood, I watched my dad lose his health. He basically worked himself to the bone and he ended up getting a cancer diagnosis and he died when he was 42 years old. And
Jeez.
so I was 9 years old when I saw my dad die. And as you can
Yeah.
imagine, it just totally rocked my world, right? I mean, my
Yeah.
dad, this guy I looked up to, I saw him like literally deteriorate before my eyes. And it put an impression on my young mind in such a strong way that like I realized that health is so foundational. Like we can all get busy, we can focus on our work and providing all this stuff. But like when we lose our health, we lose everything we love, our energy, our ability to provide. And I saw that happen to my dad. And I kind of made a promise that I wasn't going to let that happen to me. So I got interested in fitness from a young age. I got my first pair of dumbbells that my mom gave me right around my 10th birthday, and I started to train. And in the process of training and like building myself up, it was also like spiritual healing. Like I learned too that when I invested in my training and I started to eat healthier, I started to feel better. I wasn't as sad. And then over time, I started to feel like actually strong and motivated. And people started to ask me how I could help them improve. And that got me into fitness, I'd say, in a period of about a decade of competitive bodybuilding, personal
Nice.
training, and doing all things to like build myself up. And then when I eventually went to naturopathic medical school, I saw so many people like just like my dad who were putting their health on the back burner because of life and they didn't always have cancer diagnoses. Maybe it was like heart issues, diabetes, pre-diabetes type stuff, but the story is always the same. They weren't able to maintain a health routine amidst the busyness of life. So I decided to start the Fit Father Project to teach people what I learned, a combination of the medical training with the bodybuilding stuff and how to make it sustainable for dads who, want to be able to do all these things and be around for a long time.
Oh man, that's why I love it. Because I could only imagine how that affected you when you were 9 years old, man. Like I could not imagine that. And and for myself, like my father, I love my dad, but he still drinks like 2 liters of pop every day, you
Right.
know. And he doesn't, I'll talk to him about health and whatever, but his version of working out, I guess his saving grace was that he walked a lot.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the one thing that he kind of got was his steps in. But I
Yeah.
find that now we become even more sedentary. So it's super difficult. But just walk me through the process of what you do to really get, or what would be the first thing that you could say, hey, you know what? The one thing you could do to kind of change your life right now as a dude, you can walk around. Like, what is the one thing that's fundamental to just getting people back on track?
Well, I think it's a couple things. One, we need to work on the deep motivation and psychology and connection to our health routines, like which is foundational because we all know things that we should do and there shoulds, like we should walk more, we should lift weights a few times a week, we should eat healthier, should get to bed. But like our connection to that, this motivational connection is our why. And we need to like create that fabric of connection. So inside of our program, before we give people the meal plans or the workouts, any stuff like that, we walk them through a very deep reflection and journaling process that culminates in creating a mission statement where we help guys get very clear consciously on how their health affects all of the areas of their life that they love. Like, how are your current behaviors with your health affecting your ability to be a good parent, to make money at your job, to do XYZ, to have good connection with God and your spirituality. We're helping people see that health is not a separate bucket that you might get to. We literally are embodied. This life experience as humans, we have these bodies, and the quality of our bodies ultimately affects all the things that we do. So we help collapse that distinction for people and get really motivated. So people end up having a mission statement that's something like, I'm now committed to living healthier for the next 30 days because I know this is essential for me to be the best version of myself, to be the best dad, to feel connected in my integrity to the life that I want to live, to be able to show up and make more money, and to be around to see my grandkids grow up. And I know that the cost of this is I'm going to need to work out a few times per week, shop for healthier foods, and get to bed earlier and drink more water. And it's worth it because these deep values are so connected. So we're getting health out of this bucket in people's minds where it's like, I might get to it, or it's something separate from life. And we're starting to connect to the motivation. Now, from there, the truth is, like, you and I, we wake up every single day, CJ, and like we have a fresh day. And the routine that we execute that day is the building block of our life when it comes to our health. Like, health is not just about like, you don't just stop. It says you don't win health. You got to show up every day and like put in the work and do this. So we help guys nail their daily routine. And this comes down to like what you do in the morning, how you schedule your meals, the foods you eat, and sprinkling in exercise. So we help them develop like the sustainable routine that works for most dads.
Excellent, excellent, and you're 100% right, because it was funny. I was talking this concept to my wife yesterday, and she's just kind of like, "Yo, a bodybuilding competition is the
Mhm.
same as anything else in life. It just kind
Yeah.
of comes down to what are you doing, and what does that really look like when you break it down, from the macro to the micro, and you
Yeah.
start to examine things, and then you're like, oh, wait a minute, that's where I'm losing so much time. I'm just sitting on the couch and doing nothing, like
Hmm.
where I'm sitting down or I'm scrolling on social media when I could be doing something else that's more beneficial, right?
Yeah.
And it's those little nuances that I guess you got to pick apart for your clients, right? Where you're just like, hey, you know what? This right here could be a time that you can get up to just kind of walk around or
Sure.
take advantage of it and just do something on the couch while you're there with your kids, right?
For sure. Yeah, you can weave it into the schedule that you already have. And also the concept of momentum is so important. Like, this from the fitness competitions and just the life that you live. Like, when you're doing good behaviors and you're on track, like that momentum begets more positive momentum. Like, it's
Yeah.
easier when you're on track to like go up and show up. So we really help guys like win the morning, and every morning, like start off on the right track. That helps them have a lot more sustainable momentum throughout the day. So what that looks like is, when guys wake up in the morning following the Fit Father lifestyle, is they wake up and they rehydrate 20 to 32 ounces of water within 15 to 20 minutes of waking up, or if not immediately. Ideally, add some minerals in there. In this simple act, it's not just good physiologically because we need the water for the energy and the metabolic processes, but it's like a behavioral hook every day that's saying, boom, it's a new day. I'm putting good stuff in my body that's helping me like feel good. And it's going to make it more likely that I do good things later. We help guys standardize their first meal of the day. So whether you have breakfast with your family, sometimes between 6 and 8 a.m., or if you're intermittent fasting, doesn't matter. Whatever your first meal is, you standardize that thing, and you have pretty much the same thing Monday through Friday and maybe through the weekends. And this is key because when it comes to nutrition, you want to balance consistency with variety. You've done a
Yeah.
bodybuilding
Oh, yeah.
contest prep. So like, you need to be consistent, but at the same time, eventually you're like, I want to have something a little different. But
Yeah.
breakfast and meal one is not the time to have variety. It's to be
No.
consistent. It's just automatic. Give you something that gives you energy that you enjoy and doesn't take a lot of time. So for many guys, it's protein shakes, it's eggs and fruit, it's overnight
Yeah.
oatmeal, but you find your go-to meal and you have that basically every single day. You don't need to think about it, because if we're eating like 2, 3 meals a day, let's just say 3 meals per day for the average person, and one of those things is standardized, you just took like a third of your decisions out of the thing. And now you're getting good stuff into your body with the water, and you're off to a great start. And we've all had the exact opposite experience where you wake up, you're on the back foot of the day, you have a shitty breakfast, and then you
Yeah.
end up eating bad food later, or you skip the workout and you feel like junk. Where we need to really have this good behavioral hook in the morning, and a standardized breakfast is good. And I like to actually asks all the health hosts that I go on podcasts with for UCJ, like, what is your go-to breakfast? Because I'm sure you have
Oh,
like one
dude.
dialed in. What's your go-to breakfast?
It's funny you mentioned that. Like, immediately I just saw my boring breakfast that I have every single morning. Well, first meal of the day actually, but it's the same one, and I don't think I'll ever change it just because it's my go-to. It's
Yeah.
12 ounces of egg whites,
Yep.
2 eggs,
Yep.
a bunch of tomato, spinach if I got it, and maybe like 3 slices of cooked ham.
Boom.
Every single, yeah. And a big
Low
ass
carb,
coffee.
high
Yeah.
protein. You get your proteins, you get your healthy fats, keeps you full, doesn't take that long. And
No.
like that's awesome, right? It's
Yeah.
boring, but you say boring almost like with a little bit of like happiness because it's like you're joking, but it's like you look forward to it.
Oh,
It's
I do,
consistent.
man. You know what? You just sprinkle a little bit of Himalayan sea salt on it. You
Yeah.
know, it tastes like $1,000,000. But the thing is, to your point, and why I think it's so crucial that, people can take this concept away from this podcast. It's like, bro, as soon as you set down these foundational like building blocks, all of a sudden the rest of the day is good.
Yes.
And I think because for myself, when you mentioned how you screw up that first meal, dude, man, that happened to me where my wife has these oatmeal almond crisp, some bullshit garbage like
Yeah.
cereal, and I tried some. It was delicious. I had a bowl and a half, and I know all
Uh-huh.
about calculating your macros. And I'm like, oh
Yeah.
shit, dude, I just had 600 calories of trash. So
Yeah.
later on, my kids were like, "You want pizza?" I'm like, "Yeah, we'll have pizza."
Exactly. Because psychologically, we now get into that mindset where, like, a lot of us guys operate in this all or nothing mindset where it's
Yeah,
like, oh, it's like I blew the day. So then you just go eat BS. And then the next day, you kind of pay for that because you don't feel as good and as sharp. And now you have
yeah,
negative momentum. And so you got to shift that. We're always shifting this ball. So standardized breakfast, super key. I'm a big believer in keeping breakfast lower carb. That doesn't mean it needs to be low carb, but yours is a very low carb breakfast with
yeah.
high protein. That's awesome. The shakes and the smoothies. So if let's say you got some kind of protein powder you like,
Hmm.
maybe some almond milk, you can throw some chia seeds, hemp seeds, maybe a little spinach in there, maybe some berries if you want, whatever. Like blend that sucker up. It can taste delicious. You can take it on the go, have it right there. Very easy to digest too. Eggs are relatively easy to digest.
Yeah,
Smoothies and shakes, easy to digest. That's different than hard to digest foods, which make you feel sluggish in the morning. You don't want that. So standardize that first meal. And then the other concept is like get the idea of snacking out of your life. Like in
hmm,
between meals, like don't stop snacking. It's BS. It gets your blood sugar dysregulated. Like have a discrete meal, then you go do your business, whatever you're doing, and then have another meal later. So maybe that meal is like, we'll talk about a classic breakfast, lunch, snack, dinner framework, which works for a lot of guys. So maybe lunch comes around noon one. And so for lunch, again, I also am a big believer in standardizing. It doesn't have to be as rigorous as breakfast, but the things that work best for guys is either one, leftovers from dinner the night before. So overcooking, so you have something there is solid.
sure.
Two, a salad with protein on top of it, which you can get anywhere. So protein, whatever kind of protein you like on greens, you can do it really easily. Or three, a healthy sandwich recipe works for guys as long as you're getting like a high quality organic sprouted bread. And if bread agrees with you, cool, go for that. Like we've had guys lose hundreds of thousands of pounds on our program eating bread. So it's possible, but like have a really simple kind of dialed in lunch too. And now you have like two out of your three meals like nailed. And so now you
Yeah.
have a lot of momentum going into dinner.
Yeah, and you're 100% right because it's kind of like again, it's following that simple process of okay, I'm making sure that I'm prepped for the day, and
Yep.
people don't like the idea of meal prep itself, like even certain clients that I have, but I'm like, it's not necessary that you got to meal prep it, like 100%, where you're
Right.
measuring out every calorie like I do. But I'm just saying, like, have something like you said. You can go to the grocery store, pick up a salad. You can
Yep.
get something that's light, as long as you
Yep.
know what's in it too, and you can kind of calculate it,
Yes.
you can always ballpark it if you're not off
Yes.
by like 400 calories. Because a lot of people talk about intuitive eating and it kind of pisses me off because I'm like,
Yeah.
bro, you're off by 40% and you think you know what you're eating. I'm like, no, that's not what you're eating, dog. And it's like, and I'll talk to him and be like, you overconsume by like 1,000 calories, but you're like, this
Yeah.
is like 2 bags of chips, man. I'm like,
Yeah.
yeah, I know it's
Yeah.
brutal.
Yeah.
But no, I 100% agree with you in that it's that easy and it's that simple. It's
Yeah.
just kind of difficult to adhere to.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think it's like if you even commit from this conversation to the idea that you standardize your first couple meals of the day and you know generally what your go-tos are. And like if you want to get really dialed in and you know that you have 12 egg whites, two whole eggs, and this, like you have your macros, you don't have to think about it, like they're completely dialed in. If you get a sandwich or a salad, you know it's going to be roughly around 500 calories or whatever, because there's no way to kind of make it more if you're choosing healthy ingredients. You're dialed
Mhm.
in. Now for dinner, you can have more variety. It doesn't need to be necessarily like completely macro counted. Like what we teach people is a framework of building what we call like a perfect plate. So if you imagine like a blank plate of food and you fill a quarter of that plate with some kind of protein you love, any kind of protein, chicken, steak, salmon, whatever, turkey, whatever. And then a quarter of that plate with some kind of carb that you love. Now, you can go low carb if you want, but like we also are a believer that like you don't have to restrict carbohydrates to still like be successful. So a quarter of that place could be rice, it could be sweet potato, it could be quinoa, it could be squash, could be some kind of other vegetable medley. And then the half of that plate was some kind of fibrous vegetable that you love. So it could be broccoli, asparagus, some kind of saute, big just grab a glob of salad, put it on the plate with some
Yeah.
olive oil based dressing, really simple stuff. But if you make a perfect plate, half veggie, quarter carb, quarter protein, all of these plates are almost always 500 to 700 calories, as
Yeah.
long as you're not throwing a bunch of like crazy sauces and stuff on top of it. Like they're almost always in that range, and you can have a lot of variety. And then like you can mix it up for your family, but still like adhere to a concept. And if you do that pretty consistently, you're going to see body composition changes, period.
100%. And that's where it just becomes a simple lifestyle choice where you can eyeball it and you're like, okay, I'm pretty sure that this is going to be close to it. It's like it's a lean cut of steak,
Yes.
sweet potato, and a bunch of spinach.
Yep.
For the most part, that usually works. And it's kind of like, you're right. It's hard to deviate away from like 700 calories tops, unless
Yeah.
you have like
And
a cut of goat or something.
exactly right. And like, but what you're also talking about, and you've been doing this for so long, is you know the language of nutrition and macros intuitively. Like I could
Yeah.
probably put 3 plates of food in front of you, and you can probably within a couple hundred calories, if not 100 calories, tell me, oh, that's probably about 45 grams of carbs, 50 grams of protein, and this on the fats.
Yeah.
And like just because you've been doing it for some time, but this is a language and a literacy, just like you might learn a foreign language, that you learn over time as you do this. And then you get a lot of freedom, because you can go to a
Yeah.
restaurant, you could be like, that's what I should order, or that's roughly what will fit my game plan. And then you're free. You're free
Yeah.
because you have a baseline of knowledge, and that requires you just getting consistent. And then when it comes to shopping, like just don't buy the crap. And that's like, you don't buy the snack foods that are doing there, where like if you know where you typically slip up. For most people, it's like late night eating, it's chips or sweets or stuff after dinner. Like get yourself a healthy slotted in dinner or like dessert option. So like we have these like low sugar coconut ice cream bars, or a bit of
Oh,
dark
yeah.
chocolate, or maybe a frozen banana with some stuff on it, like whatever. But like get yourself a healthy option, so you're not feeling like totally deprived. Because if you tell yourself, I'm never going to have dessert ever again, I'm on a fitness plan, like 0% chance that's working. But if you slot in better, healthier and slot options, and then you follow this kind of framework, you're going to be so successful with nutrition. And the fact is, if there's a guy listening to this now who's younger, in teens, 20s, or 30s, like the habits that you build now are going to
Yes.
show up as your health in your 40s, 50s, and 60s. Because the biggest thing is like you lose your margin for error as you get older. Your metabolism changes, joints aren't working quite as well as they used to. So if you start good habits now, you're not going to have to unwind all this BS in a decade. And it's harder. It only gets harder. So if you can start now, you're going to be in a great spot.
And it's interesting you mentioned that. I was just listening to a podcast about neuroplasticity and how,
Yeah.
by the time after 25, I mean, those neurons are basically, they're wired together. And now you got
Yeah.
to go in there and disassemble that and go against all
Right.
these habits that you created. And even for myself, like, I had to go in there and I'm like, okay, you know what? I can't be getting up at 12 at night to eat, or like two
Yep.
in the morning or whatever.
Yep.
Cause I love snacking at night, man. Like,
Yeah.
and that was my go-to thing where, I felt maybe I just like that insulin spike before going to
Mhm.
sleep, which is awful. But
Yeah.
I love that. And these are bad habits that I developed when I was a kid, right? Because all that
Mhm.
time that, when I was younger, from like I don't know, from 10 to 25, that whole time, right when the brain's, starting to wire together, I was just
Yep.
like, let's create some bad habits and follow them. And now you got to
Yep.
go in there, and for 2 years, it was a lot of tension because I had to rip all those old habits apart,
Yes.
right?
And that's why I was telling you when you asked like what's the process of the program, and I said the first thing that we need to do is like create that mission statement, psychological framework. That is the very process of starting to create new neuro associations and like break old ones. You have to kind of both get into the dojo and like work to create new habits, but
Yeah.
also to like go in and create different emotions and connections to like why your behaviors are not serving you, what are the good ones. And like that's deep psychological work that you don't necessarily have to do if you can get things right a little bit earlier.
Mhm.
And I'll say too is like people who are listening to this particular podcast are interested in male optimization. That means
Yeah.
like physically, it means with the penis and the blood flow, like
Yeah.
all this stuff ties completely together. Like the diet you eat, the training you do is your circulatory health. Did you know that like all these overweight guys in their 40s, 50s, and 60s, like almost all of them at some point are going to get erectile dysfunction?
Oh
because
yeah.
because like if you have cardiovascular disease and heart disease, guess what? Like you're having issues downstairs because the
Yep.
blood flow is not working properly. You're not having as much nitric oxide, and good diet and good training can like completely go with all this. Like people who eat healthy diets and train and do PE exercises, they have the full suite plan to get the best results possible. So it's all one game. Whatever your goals are, it all comes back to eating good nutrition. And bad nutrition, sugars, processed foods, fried foods, trans fats, all this stuff is literally wreaking havoc on your circulatory system, which is influencing your PE gains. So if you just ate like 25% healthier on top of whatever routine you're currently doing, you're going to get better gains downstairs. It's just how it works.
100%, man. I mean, I can attest to that too from like when I was fat at one point. I got up to 268 because I told
Yeah,
myself I was bulking.
for sure.
And at that time, it's kind of like my erections were lackluster at best.
Yep.
And it was just you don't feel like yourself. You don't feel fully optimized. You don't feel healthy. And obviously when you get down a healthy weight, and your hormonal profile is okay, you feel completely different, which is why one of
Yeah.
the things that I think is probably one of the most misrepresented factors in PE is just your overall health. You got a lot of guys
Yeah.
that are overweight that are like, "Hey, I want to make gains and I want to make my dick bigger," but it's kind of like, bro, like you're not even in good shape right now. Your
Yes.
circulatory system's shot.
Yep.
Your arteries are all clogged up.
Yes.
These things are all contributing factors to like whether you'll actually make gains there or
For
not. I
sure.
think.
Oh, it is. So if your blood is constantly full of sugar, insulin, and fat from just eating too much and having not good metabolism, like that thick blood is not going to get into those end capillaries as much as it could is if you had a really good circulatory system. Also, a good argument for having omega-3s in your diet, getting fish
Hmm.
or good fish oil sources too, to help get that blood nice and thin so you can get good oxygen exchange and good blood flow downstairs is going to be so, so helpful. And then like we're talking about hormones. So optimizing hormones and testosterone obviously is a big part of like male vitality, and training, high intensity strength training a few times per week doesn't need to be daily, but like literally if you want to do like minimum effective dose, you can even do like full body training twice per week and make insane gains. Now there's
Yeah.
benefit to like training more often and like getting into the gym for psychological benefits and just constant exercise. That's good. But like high intensity exercise just a couple times a week is enough, paired with daily walking, good circadian rhythm and sleep, which I want to talk about next,
Yeah.
and then the good nutrition. So when it comes to testosterone, it's so like multifactorial, right? Like it's getting the right substrates nutritionally, good stimulus for strength training. But I think one of the biggest things is making sure that you have a proper circadian rhythm. And what we found is like testosterone and cortisol are kind of like on a seesaw. And I know you experience this during your bodybuilding prep. When you get lean, especially if
Yeah.
you're a natural doing a natural prep and you're not taking external testosterone, you
Yeah.
get lean and your body's in a stress state from all the exercise and the low calories. Cortisol levels start to creep up. When cortisol is high, it squashes testosterone. And
Yeah.
so, like, the way to actually control cortisol is to make sure that you have really good sleeping habits, which means obviously having a good bedtime routine, being right about getting to bed on a reasonable time. But it also means like making sure that you're blocking blue light and wearing blue light blocking glasses or getting night shift mode on your phone. Like it's just straight physiology. Like we're not meant to be blasted with all this artificial light. And guess who is the violates this most? Young dudes, 20 to
Yeah.
30, scrolling on Instagram before bed, on YouTube before bed, like looking at your computer or your TV and stuff like that. That is literally crushing your melatonin levels, which ends up impacting your testosterone. And then you just got to rely on stimulants the next day to like feel like you can function. And now you're just on this like rabbit wheel or this hamster wheel of like not feeling right. So got to take light seriously. So the blue light, cut that out at night. And then this is another thing that I'm now doing very seriously. I don't know if everyone has the option to do this, but get sunshine on your whole body, including your testicles if possible, in the
Yeah.
morning. And this is just facts. Like we are meant to be connected to the sun, and we get that full sunshine, especially in the morning on the testes. It raises testosterone levels. Like we get better vitamin D levels, which is correlated with testosterone. And the light in our eyes actually produces serotonin that makes us feel good and later gets converted to melatonin. So sunshine is key, getting synced up with the light cycles for testosterone male optimization. The guys that get really primal, who go outside, sunbathe naked, swing their maces, like, and eat their like organ meats. I know it's like really intense,
Oh, the
but like
Liver King. Yeah.
there's truth in that approach. There's a lot of lies and BS too, but the whole idea of
Yeah.
light and circadian rhythm is essential.
No, 100%. And that's kind of where the whole ancestral eating and just kind of taking over all that kind of stuff totally makes sense.
Yeah.
Um, oh, hold on a second. Yeah, and the ancestral eating in that I think makes 100% sense. And the one of the factors in that too was the sunlight.
Mhm.
And just the fact that, we've all deviated so far from that with the
Yes.
artificial light that we got, right? And the reason why I looked into it more than anything was because of the testosterone factor that you were talking about earlier.
Right.
And that's kind of, if you're all off in every aspect of your life, it's like you're staying up late, you're eating pizza, you're watching TV and scrolling on your phone at the same time. That's going to have some pretty detrimental effects on your body.
100%. And like, let's be honest, like, this is like some guy talk now. When do you typically, at the end of a busy day, that's where you make your worst decisions, like late at night, when you start to have cravings for bad food,
Oh,
or if you're
yeah.
doing PE exercises and maybe that turns into watching porn or doing something like this at night, which messes with your neurochemistry for the next day. Like, a
Yeah.
lot of that stuff at night is just going to carry on to your next day. And imagine on the flip side, if you're way more dedicated on your routine, you understand the impacts of this whole lifestyle, you're getting to bed earlier, doing your PE exercises whenever you're doing them, strength training, getting good on the light, like, you're going to feel like just a badass. You're going to feel like full of life. And we also know like the vitamin D thing is important. Like, when men
Yeah.
raise their vitamin D3 levels, like their testosterone levels do go up, immune system goes up. And when men have a lot of stress and they don't get the right kind of sunshine vitamin D, they get sick, they feel weak. And if guys are out there trying to get women too, the whole aspect of pheromones, which the fact that when our body's in good vitality and we're like strong and vital, we're kicking off these scents that other mammals, the females that we're looking at, like, are picking up on him. Like, they'll like subconsciously know, oh shit, that's a vital dude. Like,
Yeah.
he's got it going on. And that's not game. That's just like physiological game. It's not like you're saying some cool lines or you have whatever confidence. It's just, it oozes from you, like, chemically speaking, because you're on the right kind of routines. And
Yeah.
that's cool.
No, and it's funny too that you mentioned that because I had learned about semen retention from somebody else as well. I was talking about that energy that you carry inside of your body. They were talking about how like a lot of dudes, what's happening now is that they're addicted to porn, right? So,
Mm-hmm.
they're jerking off constantly and they're letting go of their seed, letting go of their like that
Yep.
life energy they have within
Yep.
them. And the females can pick it up.
Yep.
It's kind of like your hormonal profile is different. You
Yep.
kind of appear to be weaker, and that's just kind of where it's like, hey, you know what? You're not a good mate for me. You're not a good
Yep.
compatible mate versus the guy who's strong, he's in charge, he's working out, he's going to sleep, his test levels are up.
Yep.
He gives off a completely different vibe, right?
Yes.
And that kind of gets into the energetic side of things as well.
Energetic
But
and the chemical. Like, I'm literally telling you, there are chemicals that are sent, like subconsciously sensed, like the pheromones, which are like just aromatic compounds that other mammals can smell. That makes you like, so yes, it's like, it's a vibe, it's chemical, but whole point is like a vital man that's on his routines and doing these things gives off all sorts of signals that says to potential mates and to other guys that this guy is safe, strong, secure, dedicated, on his shit. So other guys respect it too, because it's like, this is a guy I can trust. Like, he's obviously in integrity
yeah,
doing
with
his thing.
himself. Yeah.
Right. And so, like, those are the people we want to be around.
And the other thing that you mentioned there, kind of like off the cuff, but I think is interesting because I mean, I think porn addiction is another thing that we're not talking about enough for young dudes, for men, P community, everybody just in general, for well, even guys and girls now. But you mentioned neurochemistry. How does that affect the neurochemistry or how it all works
For
internally?
sure. So like our brain, the deeper layers of our brain, like the with people call it like the reptilian layers that we share with some lower creatures are driven by a lot of dopamine. So dopamine's a main neurotransmitter that a lot of people are talking about. Dopamine gives us the sense like, okay, so let's say you have that desire to get to ejaculation. It's like that craving that
Yeah.
drives you forward, like, oh, almost there. Or like the drive that gets you to do a fitness competition is driven by dopamine, or to complete a big project, or to go after a woman or something like this. These are dopamine driven things. Like, basically, when we continuously dump dopamine through a very high stimulus for the male body, it's ejaculation and sex is as primal as it kinds of
Hmm.
gets. Your brain gets flooded with dopamine so often that the dopamine receptors in these key areas of the brain, they get so oversaturated, they go underneath the surface of the cells. So your body becomes like dopamine deficient and doesn't have proper dopamine signaling. So you get addicted. You feel like you need to constantly create more just to level yourself out. So you're
Yeah.
basically constantly depleting your body from dopamine. You're always in this like slightly wired, never quite right like state where, you have a thought come in and you're feeling like erratic and you're not feeling like grounded, and you may even struggle with motivation and depression. You're always on the high and then into the low. A lot of
Yeah.
this is mirrored in our neurochemistry. So a couple ways to actually regulate the dopamine is certainly to to get control over porn, masturbation, key. 2, strength training. 3, sleep. And then other things like cold showers, cold plunges, semen retention, like all this stuff is helping regulate our dopamine levels better, which means we're going to be more motivated to actually go after and create the stuff we want to do. Start the podcast, do the business, get after our work, crush it in school. And like, that's the stuff that really moves the needle. And I'll tell you that if you work really hard and you stay on your stuff in your 20s and your 30s, and even into your 40s, like your 50s, 60s, 70s are just so much easier. It's like you're going to pay
Yeah.
for it now or you're going to pay for it later. And having the proper neurochemistry can keep you on track.
Yeah. I mean, that was beautifully said. That's definitely gonna be one of the podcast clips.
Thanks, man. And the other thing is like too many pre-workout too. Like, look, I'm like, I had a coffee this morning and I go in bursts, but I'll tell you, when I was bodybuilding, man, I used to just crush pre-workout, a couple
Yeah.
scoops of this before everything. Like that stuff messes with your neurotransmitters long term. Like stimulants can be a part of your life, but if you feel like they're ruling you right now and you can't get
Mhm.
going without them, it's a good idea to bite the bullet and take a little bit of a stimulant sensitization break and just like get off them or really wean down for a period of time. And if you feel
Yeah.
like you're over too reliant, because what are you doing? You're artificially jacking up your nervous system. And over time, it's not just trying to get to the high you were at, start to feel normal just to hit the
Yeah.
baseline level. And that's your nervous system telling you, I am out of balance. I'm not regulated.
Bro, and I mean, I am a stim junkie. Like, I know exactly what my crutches are, and like, I love pre-workout. Like, I
Yeah.
could, oh man, like even to this day, it's one of those things where it's like, dude, that is still like the last thing that I got to work on.
Yeah.
And even for myself, it's kind of like I limited myself. I'm like, yo, man, last year, 6 months, that's all the pre-workouts I'm gonna take, right?
Yeah.
And for the competition, obviously, I'm like, okay, well, I'm
Yeah.
feeling really low, and I did have that play in as a
For
factor.
sure.
But dude, I mean, I can totally attest to the fact that it's like when you get used to that crutch, it becomes almost like I viewed it almost became more of a ritual than it
Yep.
was like I even enjoyed it or I even needed it anymore. It's kind of like I was like a fiend for it, where it's
Yeah, and
just like,
it tastes good. The stims are nice at times, but like, hey, if you're on the pre-workouts right now, like, okay, so maybe it's beneficial to have some caffeine plus the pre-workout things before like a heavy deadlift day or a heavy squat
yeah,
day. But like, do you really need to get jacked up on 300 milligrams of caffeine to like do arms and shoulders? Like, probably not. It feels
no,
good, but
yeah,
like, get a stimulant-free pre-workout that you use some of the time because it's still good to have the creatine, beta alanine, maybe some
hmm,
aminos and stuff like that. Like, all that stuff's good, and then just use the pre-workout occasionally. And I just think it's another area. And I think as guys, we're talking about the process of self-mastery. What I always like to look at, and I'm like, look, I'm not beyond this, like I'm on the journey too, is what are the things that actually legitimately control me right now? Like, what are the
yeah,
things that I'm a little bit of a slave to? Is it the stimulants? Is it the porn? Is it thinking of what other people think of me? Whatever that area is for you individually right now, if you go into that, start to recognize the underlying patterns, and over time to gain freedom from that, man, you are on the growth path as a man. Because we know like the idea of like a weak representation of a man is a man who is enslaved to all
hmm,
these base desires, who doesn't have the autonomy and the freedom of the strength to go out there and like penetrate the world and create. He's at an effect of all this stuff. He's trapped, he's muddled, he's not clear, he doesn't have power. So one way to create the power, and this is kind of like a psycho spiritual aspect of it, is to like look at the things that control you and then what can you do to like add some toughness or gain some control back. And I think the PE stuff is fascinating, right? Because this is like the razor's edge of something that's like, it's like a goal. It's very primal and sexual to work on like adding energy to our sacred male center, but at the same time that could so easily dip over
oh
into
yeah,
something that controls you, something that's steeped in not feeling good enough, and then something that goes into porn and dopamine depletion. So it's like you're playing on a razor's edge. But again, a lot of the greatest men and women of all time know how to play on that razor's edge, and if you can, I think you're very powerful.
yeah. And I mean, to your point, in regards to that, I remember when I first started, like, and there's a technique called edging, right, where you're basically,
Yeah.
basically just masturbating, but controlling the orgasm, the
Yes,
ejaculation. But when I started, it was just an excuse to like, okay, how much porn can I watch for like the next hour and
for
not
sure.
come? You know,
Yep.
and it was 100% like, was it beneficial? Sure, because I did learn how to control
Mm-hmm.
like the sense, the urge to ejaculate and all that. But at the same time, it was just an excuse for me to feed my addiction,
Yes.
right?
And
Versus
I
what
think,
it is
yeah,
now. It's something that you're right. You do have to master that urge and that reptilian brain because you're just like, okay, I want to. I can't ejaculate, but I'm gonna get this and I'm gonna feed into that. And then eventually I'm just gonna ejaculate later on throughout the night because I'm just I'm not in
Yes.
control here.
Exactly. And I'll say this too. If you can, if someone is using like in like the edging practice, so like one, you are constantly dumping dopamine as you're getting closer, and it is going to have a neurotransmitter effect. But two, it is like there are in some cultures they see some positives to it. Like so the Chinese spiritual Taoists, they would like do edging, and then on the process of like
Yeah.
right about to ejaculate, bring some of that energy up the spine through breathing, and like they believed it helped their psycho spiritual development. So like there's deep stuff to that, and I suppose it could be used, but I'm saying
Hmm.
like could you try to do that without the porn? I think that'd be a lot more interesting
Yes.
to not necessarily have to rely on like a external visual stimulation like that, and you could just be like more internal into feeling your energies, feeling the blood flow into the pelvis, stimulating, but then it's in a more controlled way than allowing it to get out of control.
100%. And the thing is, when I would do edging without it, it's almost like you are basically going within, almost like the same way that
Yes.
you do like via meditation, right? And
Yes.
that's what I found so strange, and this was like, 5 years after, I'd started off using the crutch, which was the porn for the longest
Mhm.
time. And then I started doing it that way. And it's just like, okay, these sensations are coming up.
Yes.
Okay, this is where the breath work comes in so I can
Yes.
control it and then I can build my stamina. And that's where you
Yeah.
really start to master self. And that's kind
Yes.
of where I'm like, okay, this is where I got to get rid of all these external factors and just go
Yes.
within and it becomes fully intrinsic. And that's where I'm like, okay, this ties into the meditation
It
the
does.
breath work, all that
Yes.
stuff. And then all of a sudden, next time you're having sex with your wife, it's like, bro, I got this. You can
Yes.
really settle down and just relax into it and enjoy the moment more because you actually know what you're feeling now, and it totally changed the game for me.
Yeah. Now that was beautifully said. I totally agree. And for people who like have ever had the thought, like, man, I think I should meditate, or I wish I could meditate, like what you just described in the context of this conscious PE that's tied into the breathing and the inward turning of your awareness is absolutely a form of physical meditation. And then maybe it leads
Interesting.
you to a practice of just sitting with a straight spine and like working
Yeah.
on your own mental, observing your mental patterns. And this is a deep aspect of male self-mastery. I think the underlying thing that I completely agree with you on is there's a turning inward, and not
Hmm.
like this world right now is very distracting. The phones are distracting. Everything's looking to take your attention. And just like we casually release semen when we masturbate, we're
Hmm.
casually releasing our attention when we're just looking at all of these things. Whereas I think the powerful man knows how to bring the energy inward and then very consciously like release it in terms of a creation or sex with wife or sex with whatever. It's just like it's a more intentional. It's not just a constant power leak. It's like a choice to explode that
Yeah.
energy that you've stored up, and that's a completely different game.
Yeah, man. And that's I think it's one of the things that you're 100% right. We are just distracted from the moment we wake up to the moment we go to sleep.
Yeah.
And I mean, I didn't really start getting into meditation probably until like honestly 2009 or 2020, around the time of COVID, where I really started taking it serious,
Nice.
right? And it's one of those things that when you slowly start to go inside of yourself, that's where I got more into like, healing,
Yeah.
the inner child, breath work,
Yes.
breaking generational curses and all that kind of stuff, which I always
Yes.
kind of viewed as like, that's that woo woo stuff. But
Yeah.
now, as of late, the more I go down to like the spiritual side of things, I start to realize that, hey, you know what? I am not just a physical being. There's a lot more
Yes.
to us. Right. And that's kind of the
Uh-huh.
soul aspect that plays into us and really mastering that masculine energy. Because if
Yes.
not, I feel that we will just be slaves to what we feel in the moment and then you go off, right?
For
So it's
sure.
kind of like I think all these things tie into us really, mastering self and mastering, the masculine mind and the masculine aspect of ourselves.
Yes, and we're getting deep right here, and I think like mastering the physical body through training, mastering the subconscious mind, I guess you could say, through the introspection of like seeing where some of your patterns have come from, recognizing that there was stuff that happened in your childhood that you responded to and shaped a perception of that's become your unconscious habits, and you identify as that. And if you begin to meditate, at least for me, I've been serious about it for a number of years now. I ended up reconnecting with God, like, and even
Yeah.
in like back into like Christian roots that I had before, through a process of like actually sitting still, getting to know myself on a deeper level, and then
Yeah.
finding my connection to all of this. And so it can go in deep places, and I highly, highly recommend that. And what a beautiful journey to share with you in this conversation. It's so
Yeah.
cool that you're walking that as well.
Well, I think the more I think about it, and I talk to my wife about this all the time, it's like I really feel that we are here to learn. And I do feel that, every single day for the rest of our lives, you are supposed to learn something and take something away. But without reflection, you can never really go deep into like what concept did I just kind of come across today that,
Yeah.
I could probably take something away from and apply to myself
Yes.
for the rest of my life. And I think it's a combination of the meditation, the breath work, all these different things of like, okay, let's replay what happened in the day before I go to sleep and where can I
Yes.
be better and start to evaluate these things that you really start to learn. And I feel that that deep work and that growth that needs to happen for us as men and just, well, everybody in general, it starts with us. Like I can't change the world. So
Yes.
without the intrinsic work being done, I can't really influence or make somebody else's life better, mainly my kids and my wife.
Well said. Completely said. And like, let's look at what happens if we're not intentional with our daily routine and kind of bring it back to like why the day ultimately matters. Is we've talked about a lot of lofty, high philosophical, spiritual concepts, but ultimately it all kind of boils down to how you approach and live every day, because our life is a
Yeah.
series of these days, and it gets busy in the middle of the day with, especially when you have a family, kids, job, school, work, whatever, all these things. Like having a little bit of that sacred time in the morning and the evening, just even if it's 5-10 minutes to yourself to have a little reflection, sit for a little bit of meditation, get your water in the morning, connect with the sun. Like these little micro moments are so important. And because the rest of the day can be caught up in the business. But if you get into a routine of doing these things at the bookends of your day, now you have a
Yeah.
much more conscious and processed life. And you're not just driven by all these unconscious habits or insecurities that you've begun to believe are yourself, but they're just like habits and patterns that we've all picked up.
Well, what's interesting too that you mentioned, and I think for a lot of men to change their lives, it's almost like how you start your day, how you end your day. It's just a
Yes.
continuation of your life, right? It's kind of like
Yep.
every day, just like a building, but you're going in the right direction.
Yes. And I'll say one more final thing. And this is I think it's important for guys to start telling the truth more. And if not like all the time. And what I mean by this is like I got into the process of like realizing I started to tell white lies or just say things that weren't exactly true. And what that does is, even though you feel like it may make your life easier in the short term by doing that, it actually weakens your own word, and it weakens your own
Hmm.
connection to your word and the power behind that, which actually weakens your ability to like trust yourself and your intuition. So you talked about the idea of reflecting and like and being able to like look at what
Interesting.
happened with good clarity. Like your ability to do that really well kind of hinges upon the power of your truthfulness, how truthful you are with what you say and what you speak and how you talk and communicate with yourself. So we all feel like sometimes we've deceived ourselves, or we say we're not going to do something and then we find that we do it and we feel guilty. Like that's the opposite. That's a disconnection from our sense of integrity. When you can reestablish your own sense of integrity and wholeness, and it comes down to actually your words and like making sure that what you're feeling is mirroring what you're saying, then you have a deeper connection to your own intuition. And I would say to God guiding you in your life. And then you can
Interesting.
relax a little bit, because then you can kind of go with the flow and you have a sense of
Yeah.
where you're going, and you don't have to be so stressed out about trying to create it all from your ego. Because your ego is has all these desires and it can be stressful and you're not there yet, or you want to do this, but you haven't done this, versus the person who's a little more spiritually centered can relax, trust the flow. They know that they're speaking the truth and like representing stuff that's integral and like for them. And then life gets a lot easier. And like, I think that's what we're meant to learn, especially as we go from young men and we get into families. And then when you have people to start to rely on you and you have kids or a
Yeah.
spouse, and then your word ultimately becomes bigger than just you. It is your ability to co-create, to protect, to provide. Like that's
Hmm.
why this is all so essential. So it all ties in, right? I mean, it all ties in. I think ways to strengthen your word are saying you're going to work out and going to work out. Ways to strengthen your word or saying you're going to do PE exercises and actually doing it. Having a morning and evening routine, as simple as the things like the water we talked about earlier. All these are like these micro actions that create more integrity and wholeness, which opens up, I think, this deeper spiritual dimension of our being as men. And the idea of rituals too. When we have these little rituals, whether it's a morning ritual, an evening ritual, the water, the workout can be a ritual. Those sacred spaces and times help strengthen our integrity and our word.
Man, I don't know how to end it better than that.
Cool.
No, but that's honestly, it was a fascinating talk, and I would love to have you on again because I feel like, hey man, there's so much more that we can talk about.
For sure.
But
I love
definitely,
this. You're a
yeah,
super deep and cool guy, and I really enjoyed the time, and I appreciate everyone who's still listening to this conversation up this point. Clearly something is like resonated inside of you, and like the truth that's been shared, I believe, is not just a CJ truth or an Anthony truth, is a shared truth about men. And how
Yeah.
cool is it with all the distraction that we do have in today's day and age that we can still come together through the internet and like share something that I believe is like truly profound. And I'll just speak to you directly, CJ, and obviously to listeners. Like, dude, this is like sacred, beautiful stuff to be able to like connect with you in deep ways in this conversation, and like know that although we've had different families, different lives, different locations, we're walking like very similar paths. I think this is the path of like the sacred evolving man that we're all kind of like
Mhm.
on together. And like, damn, it's cool that we're here together doing this. It's like, it's so amazing.
Hey man, had an absolute blast, and I definitely will talk to you again in the near future.
Cool, bro. Thank you so much.
Hey, everybody listening, hope you enjoyed this episode. We'll talk to you in the next one.